Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Eric Rodriguez. He's the owner of Change Maker LLC. He worked in the tech industry for years before becoming a speaker. And so for those of you who aspire to become speakers, you may have questions like, how do you get speaking engagements? How do you figure out pricing? What do you need to have in order to be a speaker? So many questions. So let's get some answers. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Eric.
Thank you so much, Neil. I'm very excited to be here today and share what I've been learning on this journey so far.
Wonderful. So when it comes to the speaking that you do, Eric, what is your speaking topic and how did you come to it?
Yeah, so I speak about the future of the human experience as a background in engineering and as someone that's been at the intersection of technology and community and technology and education and also technology and the experiences that we have from shopping and learning and different ways of how we interact with the world. I was always very mindful of how technology is basically extending our human condition. And so I just became obsessed with the promise of that technology could bring to the world. And that we're now in this era of AI, and there's this uncertainty of what role can AI play, what role does technology play in my life or my professional life or in the next generation's life. And so I want to be part of that conversation, more in a more of empowering perspective, more in a positive, optimistic perspective, but more importantly, making sure the audiences see themselves in this work as well. And so my tailored keynote is the future human experience.
Okay. So let's say someone who's watching or listening to our conversation, they've decided, I want to become a speaker. They've decided what their speaking topic is going to be. They've even gone as far as to develop a keynote. How could they go about selling themselves as a speaker?
Yeah, so right now that we are in this digital era, there's so many unique ways to share your message out there to the world. That's the first thing, right? Use these digital platforms from something as simple as creating your website for, less than $50, including the domain name, to really beefing up your LinkedIn and being very thoughtful about how you want to present your message out there to the world. And so if you've already figured out, what you want to talk about, what your topic is, and what your unique role in that conversation is, start sharing it, engage in these conversations, reach out to even folks that are probably having these conversations around this space too, and engage in that, comment into their post, just engage with them, also connect, right? Just like yourself and I, we connect, Emil, too, right? And the platforms that we get to share. So if y'all share a similar vision or mission, or you feel that there's some audience members there that might resonate with your message, reach out and connect. But it first starts with sharing the message that you care about sharing.
All right. And then when it comes to how do you get speaking engagements, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so there's several ways. One way is directly, right? So folks could find you on your own website or on your own LinkedIn. I've gotten several ways of people just reaching out to me saying, "Hey, Eric, there's this conference here. We thought about you about being a speaker," and then we just continue the conversation there. Also, on my website now, you have a book me, which is a very simple contact form, and so they could reach out to you that way. Very simple information, name, event, and how can Eric be of service to you? And so that's one way they could reach me. And that's how I would say the majority of speakers start that way. The next phase is working with agencies. And so there's different agencies depending on what your topic is and what your industry you want to go to serve. There's different agencies that serve different areas. And so again, having worked in the tech sector, one of the ways that we would hire speakers is that we would work with bureau agents. And so that gave me an opportunity to network myself into those communities. And so that also gives you an opportunity. Now, again, bureau agents, they vary depending on one, the industry, two, the fee, three, maybe even your location, right? Some might be a little bit more regional than others. And so that's another way too. So as you're building your business out, as you're building out your speaking business, you'll have an opportunity to connect with bureau agents as well in different events and different sessions. You never know who you're able to connect with, and you might find representation in that way as well.
Oh, wow. I've always heard that when it comes to the bureaus and agents, they don't typically work with people who are just getting started with their speaking business. But you're saying that that's possibly not the case?
No, correct. That's possibly not the case, right? Depending again what your credibility is, what you bring to the table. There's some speaker agencies that are much more boutique and much more, hey, they want to be of service to the starting speakers because they know if they're going to be building out for the next 5, 7 years, being in the ground level, building them up is even much more fruitful in the long term. Another other industries work with certain niches, right? And so I have, for example, representation in the education sector. And so I work with a particular agency for education sector, Campus Speak. And so they represent me when it comes to the universities in higher ed. And so yeah, so it varies. It varies depending on what experience you want to bring in. Now, the other thing too, I'll just share with you too, Neil. One of the things that I think gave me that encouragement to become a speaker was that to a certain extent, I was already doing this within the corporate America sphere, right? And so I had an opportunity to MC events. I had an opportunity to speak at leadership conferences, ERG conferences, at customer events, executive events too. They put me on stage to MC or do fireside chats, et cetera. So I was very comfortable with this. And so when I started doing this business a little bit over a year ago now, one of the switches that I needed to do in my head as far as my experience level, bringing my experience level into the stage was that I'm not just starting this in 2023. I've been doing this for years. And so if you have that call to go speak, right, or become a speaker, tap into what you've already been doing too, right? More than likely, if you're having that thought today, it's because you've already been put in a situation to share your story, share the things that you care about, share the problems you want to go solve. Out there, the stages probably look a little bit different, and that's okay. But you've been vulnerable enough to share your message. And so lean into that as well. And so I think that was also my aha moment that even though Change Maker was formed in the last over the last 14 months or so, my speaking and my ability to be on stage and to engage with audiences has been longer than that as well. And so that's the experience you also bring to the table and could also give you a different perspective when you're speaking to also agencies and representation as well.
You're 100% correct, Eric. And I think a lot of people who are just getting started out think that because they're just getting started out, I need to start at square one. I can't possibly charge a certain amount of money because I'm just getting started. But you're right. Before you were a speaker, you were something. And that something is you're able to draw from that something. There were lessons you learned, there were failures that you learned from. There was a whole lot of information and teachings and learnings that you got from your previous life before you were a speaker. And you'd be foolish not to draw upon those learnings and teachings to benefit your speaking career. And not only that, but there are people who are willing to pay money to learn and from those teachings that from before you were a speaker. I I think a lot of times it just has to do with the confidence to be able to charge what you think the market is willing to bear for whatever you're selling. And I think a lot of new speakers, they struggle with that confidence.
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're the first one, either in your family, in your community, trying this out new. I remember when I was first starting this, someone had asked me, he's like, are you doing this full time or just like on the side? I was like, no, this is what I'm going to be doing. But it was rare because no one in my family had done something like this, right? Or in my immediate, cousins or tios and tias, right? And so it was just a little bit different. But now that they see me on the stages, now that they see me also creating content and podcast and being in traveling around the country, it's fascinating, right? Because they also start seeing these possibilities. But not only that, but I would say your media network starts seeing this too. And I would say, Neil, probably half of the conversations I have now with my network, of course, it's about them checking in, but it's also about, wow, Eric, how do you build your personal brand outside of this, right? And I think that was my other aha moment that I had within in corporate America, probably closer to 2020, was that even though I had built a really good brand in the corporate space, I was realizing that it was so happens that it was Eric Rodriguez working in corporate. It wasn't the corporate leading Eric. And when I started leaning into that and saying, wow, I have a unique perspective to share that yes, could be connected with the corporation, which is fantastic. But if it's not, it's okay. It's still mine. It's still my perspective, and I still want to share it with the world. And so when I started leaning more into that, I think that also was a big aha moment that my brand is also valuable, right? That my value doesn't come from necessarily my job title. It comes from the work that I care about and the problems I want to go out there and solve for the world.
100%, Eric. And I think a lot of us, we get wrapped up in those titles, especially as you move up within organizations and you get to
Yeah.
go to networking events and cocktail parties and you pass along your card or your LinkedIn
Yeah.
profile and they see the title and they think this is an impressive person. But guess what? The next day I could get laid off. There could be a restructuring and that title is gone. That company is gone. It's your ex Google, your ex, Yahoo,
So,
your ex Netflix. So now, what are you now? Are you a nobody now because you don't work at these companies anymore? I would hope not. You've learned a whole lot, I
right.
suspect, from
Exactly.
working at those places, and you could use all of those things to benefit yourself and your personal brand. I 100% agree with you, Eric. So when it comes to the pay part, this is I think a
Yeah.
big issue that a lot of new speakers face as well is how much do you charge for your services? How did you go about figuring that out?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And there's several ways, right? One of the ways I like to simplify for folks, especially that are starting off, is and someone shared this with me not too long ago, and I love their perspective. I think it simplifies it a lot, which is you go to three yeses and then you move up, right? And so if you're starting off and you haven't gotten three yeses yet in a particular amount that you're looking for, then you're probably still not there. And so again, let's keep it super simple, right? $1,000, right? So as soon as you get those three yeses of $1,000, then more likely go and explore and see what would it look like if you raise your fee a little bit more and get the three yeses there and then move it up a little bit more. Now, with that said, that's just from a fee perspective, right? That's how you can move up into your fees, right? So you're testing the market out. The other part, which is the reality for a lot of us when we're starting this off, is you have to do the reps. You have to build your credibility in the space, right? So me raising my hand saying, "Hey, I'm a speaker because I spoke at all these conferences." That's great, but my audiences have not seen that. Bureau agents have not seen that, and so when you're starting off, you're really into the how do I put myself out there? How do I put my message out there? And how do I also capture these moments that I'm building these credibility? So you're looking for testimonials, you're looking for video footage of you on stage, right? So it becomes this chicken and egg thing, right? It's like, put me on stage. Well, let me see a video of you on stage. And then so it goes back and forth. And so really when I started off my business was really going to different conferences, different associations, probably here locally. I'm based out of Phoenix, Arizona. So I was doing conferences here in Arizona or close here and just building credibility. I hired a video team to come and follow me and record this. Now, you don't have to do that. You could have either the conference recorded for you, if they let you do that, or bring our phones that we have today are fantastic, and so set up a tripod there and record yourself as well. And so part of that too, I had to build out a video reel. So when I built out the video reel, it created additional credibility. So now my fee could be a little bit more higher, right? Because now people have seen me on stage, people have seen my testimonials. And so my fee progressed based on the reps that I was doing, based on the stages I was on. And then also when you're on these different stages, people reach out to you as well, right? Because they saw you and then they say, oh, wow, Eric, I want to bring you over here to this conference or to my event over here or to my company. Can you do this? And so it evolves, your fee evolves in time. But as long as you're continuously putting out your content and your reps and your credibility out there, your fee will continue to progress in time as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You know, when it comes to people that are getting ready to become speakers, they may benefit or they may think that joining some sort of speaker program could be helpful for them as opposed to just kind of just jumping out there and then saying that they're a speaker. Do you have any experience with speaker
Yeah.
programs? And if so, what are the benefits and I guess the downsides of them?
Yeah, so the speaker program that I joined early on was Impact 11. It's a fantastic organization, fantastic program. I actually joined them based on a recommendation of a bureau agent. And this happened, this is a quick story, but this happened because a company had reached out to me. I was still in the corporate world, and a sister company had reached out to me and said, Eric, can you come and speak at our leadership conference? And I was like, wow, I would love to. Thank you for thinking of me. And again, it was just a LinkedIn reach out of a contact that I knew. I would love to speak at your conference. And I meet with their team. And again, I had spoken at different conferences, I'd hired speakers. So I know what questions to ask. I know how to set up an event and I know how to understand the impact that they want the speaker to make. And so we're wrapping up this call virtually. And as we're wrapping up the call, they said, Eric, how much do you charge? And I was like, no, I don't charge anything. I just like to speak at, corporate events. At that time, I never had asked anyone for money. And of course, I made sure I covered all the legal ramifications of that in the corporation. But eventually they paid me to do this. And because they were hiring me for me, not because of my company. And so when I reached out to a bureau agent that I knew, a friend of mine, we had already built a relationship. And I told her, I said, hey, someone's trying to pay me to speak. I want to learn about the business of speaking. And she told me, and that's when she recommended Impact 11. She said, look, this is a great organization that will get you, it will dive deeply into the business of speaking. Now, it is an investment, talking about some of the challenges of it is an investment. And so I was very fortunate enough that that time I was working in corporate America, that I could sell some of my assets that I had in the corporation, that I was able to invest in that in myself and learn. And so that became a wonderful community for me, that surrounded myself by speakers that are in all different levels, right? From starting off to seasoned 10-year, 15-year veterans. And so when you surround yourself by these individuals, you could use them as resources as well. But with that said, it also becomes very overwhelming. It becomes very overwhelming because you're looking at these speakers that have been there for 10 years, building multiple years and streams of income, that you're not there yet. But sometimes it could be direction where you want to go, but also could be a little bit overwhelming on where you're at today. And I would say the second community has been extremely rewarding for me, which is where we met, which was Talkadot. And that has been an awesome community to connect with over the last several months, and work with Aaron, work with that team there, and build out not only how you build out your brand, but how do you engage with your customers as well. And so sharing some of these best practices. And I'll share this with you too. Speaking communities are important because having come from the corporate world and as being an extrovert, that I get energy from people. When you're not at events, when you don't have these gigs, it becomes very lonely, right? And so connecting with other individuals that are going through the same journey as you is just as important, right? Because that keeps you in the game. It keeps you building your credibility, but also keeps you on your toes too, about, hey, where can you take this content next, right? Where can you get it forward? And also from context perspective, you never know, right? I mean, Neil and I could be crossing paths today, and then 6 months from now, I could get a gig, and I get double booked, and I'm like, hey, have you reached out to Neil Thompson, because he'll be fantastic for you, right? Or vice versa, right? So when you build this credibility with other speakers, they start vouching for you as well. And so I've had speakers come here to Phoenix. They reach out to me. I'll go to the conference with you, and just to be there, be of service, right? And so these communities do end up paying off in the long term, because the relationships end up being long term. Even though the communities could change in time, but the relationships are what last for a very long time.
Oh yeah, I fully agree. When it comes to also the speaking communities that you belong to, I get the sense that sometimes people will join these type of communities having certain expectations, and then those expectations don't get met, and then perhaps they're a bit disgruntled over how their experience with the community went. What reasonable expectations should one have when joining such a community?
Yeah, so I think communities, especially in this digital world, you get as much as you could put in there, right? We're in this digital space that a community is one platform, another community is another platform. You have a LinkedIn platform, you have a Facebook platform, and you have you could easily get distracted, and all of a sudden be like, oh, that's right, I was supposed to connect with Neil on this other stuff. We're having this conversation, and then I went, 3 other directions. And so I think that's some of the challenges too, right? That you don't have this one side, or this one place where you can connect with everyone. You have to make the effort to go to these things. Now, don't get me wrong, they also do the in-person events, which are fantastic in some of these communities, which I highly encourage you to do. But it also is an investment, right? And so getting the schedules together, if you have family, if you're on the other side of the country, it's a little bit more challenging. And so I would say that's difficult too. I've been very mindful over last year to make sure I make those in-person events a priority. But after a year of doing it, it's a significant investment. I mean, looking back, it's significant. But the relationships, again, the connections that you build, they're long term. I mean, to this day, there's probably not one place in this country I could go to, at least from the bigger cities perspective, that I could go to and not know now a speaker, because I took the time to build these relationships, took the time to connect online or on LinkedIn and just put the effort in there to get to know those other individuals. Not necessarily to be of service to you. That's the other thing too, right? Sometimes when you go into communities, you're like, okay, I'm going to go into community so I could get as much as I can out of it. And what you realize is that the best way you could get something out of it is when you first put others first. And so when you go into community, think about how you're being of service to others. And so when I joined communities, what I learned early on was that the service I could provide others was making that corporate America into speaking, the speaking business transition, right? And because I had become this individual that had done that. And so how do I help others navigate some of those challenges as well? And so when you're able to do that first, things will pay off in the long term. I'm a big believer in playing the long game. Don't go into things thinking that you're going to get a return in 2 to 3 months. Think about how you're doing it in 12 months, 18, 24 months down the road, because that's really what really matters is those long-term relationships and the long-term impact that you can make in others' lives, but others can make in your life as well.
For the people who are listening or watching this conversation, Eric, and they're thinking, I want to become a speaker to the point where I'm going to leave my job and be a full-time speaker. What are all the steps in between?
Yeah, so I would say first, be thoughtful about your personal brand. What are you putting yourself out there, right? So even if right now you're in the corporate world, be very thoughtful about the message that you're putting out there. Lean into that, and it doesn't mean go against your company. It doesn't mean do something counter of what your company is standing for, the mission vision that they do. But be much more thoughtful about sharing your information out there. If you're just sharing stuff about your corporation, then your brand is your corporation. Share your unique perspective. Share something. There's this really interesting practice called news hacking, right? Which is, hey, when the news comes out, share your perspective about this, right? We're now in this era of constant news and breaking news, right? Every day there's something. So if you have a unique perspective to share, it doesn't mean you have to share something about Pokemon and you could care less about Pokemon. But if it's something that you honestly, thoughtfully care about, and there's news that's relevant to that, lean into that and share your perspective about it. And so I think that's one of the first things you could do. I would say it's one of the easiest. And I'll say the second easiest one to do is create your website. Create your website. Be very thoughtful about that. And some people say, Eric, well, I have my LinkedIn, I have my Instagram, I have all this other stuff. That's great, but guess what? That's a LinkedIn that belongs to other companies. It doesn't belong to you. And so if you're able to create your own website.com, mine, for example, is ericjrodriguez.com, then it makes you even yourself think, how am I presenting my own brand out there? And it's a little bit harder than you think, right? Even though some of our websites are very simple, 4 or 5 pages max, but you're thoughtful about like, okay, wow, what am I sharing? How am I summarizing who I am? What do I stand for? Like, this is not, there is no corporate logo on there. It's just you. And so that would be my encouragement too, that find your voice, test your voice out. I mean, even just creating something simple as a blog, right? Put yourself out there, put your thoughts out there and engage in these conversations. I think that's a great way to start. And you never know. I have a really good friend of mine in New Orleans that now he's starting to get speaking engagements simply because he started sharing his perspectives about AI. That was it. And it just happens that intersected in this era that everyone's asking about AI. And he's getting some really nice gigs, mostly in the Louisiana area, but he's comfortable virtually or in person. But it was just because he started sharing his perspectives on LinkedIn and on social media. And so you never know where people might be watching, but start sharing your perspective.
How did you have the confidence to leave your corporate job to become a speaker full time?
Yeah, so I would say it was a couple of things. One was my journey that started in 2010. When I started off in the tech sector in 2010, one of the most thoughtful conversations I had with my manager was about what I wanted to do in my career and the impact I wanted to make. And to be honest with you, Neil, and everyone that's listening, I was really encumbered by my title and my resume, right? I was like, look, I've only have an engineering degree and I only have a master's in this, and therefore I could only do this, right? And then therefore I'm only going to move jobs twice, which is going to be over here, and that's it. And he challenged me to think differently. He's like, look, you already started this job. You're already in the tech sector. Really, what problem do you want to go solve? Like, what do you want to do? And the reason he was asking me this was because every day at 5 o'clock, even though I was doing my job fine, I was performing, I would clock out and go and do work in the community. I would go do work in education. I would go and volunteer and teach classes in Spanish for digital literacy. I didn't have kids at that time, so I had the opportunity to have a night job. And on the weekends, I would volunteer as well. And so I was just super involved in the community here in Arizona. And so he asked me, he's like, "What do you want to do?" And I eventually I answered him. I said, "You know what? One of the things I want to do is I think the world is moving super fast. Technology is moving super fast. In our communities, we're leaving communities behind. Um, Education wants to be there, but they're struggling. Community members want to be there, but we're struggling. And basically, the tech sector is responsible for exponential change. Like there is no linear change in technology. And so I was like, I think we need to help communities get there. I really thought he was going to fire me after that, Neil. I was like, great, this is it. After 1 year of there, this is great. He's going to think you don't belong here. And what he said changed my life. He said, Eric, so from here on out, every job you should have, think about every job should be just a tool into your toolbox. And think about building a toolbox in your life and your career. And that's it, right? So he's like, don't be enamored with the job title, don't be enamored with the grade level. That stuff will come. Just be enamored with learning and challenging yourself. And so it was through that conversation early in my career that I just always continuously just challenged myself. I was like, hey, am I still learning? Am I still learning? Am I still growing? Am I still tying into that impact that I want to make? And so with that, my career just grew into these different fascinating areas that, again, I wasn't encumbered by a box that was filled in a 1 page or 2 page resume. I was encumbered by where I could go and learn. And it was through that journey that I was on stages different times. And then when it got to that moment in my career that I was like, wow, you know what? I somewhat did it, right? I'm in the education sector and the changes I want to make, and I'm doing this and I'm having a great time. And eventually our team was impacted by the tech layoffs as well. And so we were given that option of saying, hey, do you want to stay or do you want to leave? And I kept thinking back at the conversation I had with Impact 11 was like, wow, there's something here for me to do that I don't think I've explored yet. And I really am interested in going to learn and explore more about. And so that's where I leaned in super. I mean, it wasn't super fast, but it was very close to fast. After a conversation with my family and my wife, we talked about it a little bit more. She's been encouraging me for some time too, saying, Eric, you're ready for this. You're ready to go and do your thing. And let's go. And so that's where my confidence came from. It wasn't just from one night to the other, it's just things lining up, but having a community around me that said, Eric, you have a message and a story to share. Just imagine the people you get to impact now because you're not bounded by the corporation. You're bounded basically on the impact that you want to make and the people you want to reach.
This has been a great conversation, Eric. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, Neil, thank you again so much for having me and sharing a little bit about my stories. I'm looking forward to be of service to anyone that's thinking of transitioning into the speaking industry. The best ways you could reach me is my website, ericjrodriguez.com. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. You can reach me there as well. And then also on any of the social media platforms. But ericjrodriguez.com is where you could reach me.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Neil. Take care.